Thank you, and welcome to the NASM CPT podcast and our Facebook Live webcast. My name is Richey, and I want to welcome you and thank you for being here. And I want to welcome a special guest. He's a friend of mine, and we've known each other for coming close to 20 years that we've been working together in the fitness industry. And he is the author of this here book, Smart.
Got a copy.
The Science of Exercise Made Simple. I do have it. I've got a nice little quote and a little written thing in here. It says, Rick, and then next to it, it says, Doctor. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah, I gave it to you when I was out there that year. Yeah.
That's right. It's been so cool to be on this fitness journey with you. Thanks for your friendship and congrats on all the success. Well deserved. And I can certainly say that back at you, my friend. Welcome, Pete McCall. Thanks for being on with us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your inviting me and good to see you guys this morning.
And it's good to see you. So tell me a little bit about what's been going on with you since we last worked together. So not seen each other or spoken together since we last actually worked in the same business, the same job, the same role together at Town Sports International when we were doing educational content and delivery for that company.
Well, no, and so that's actually what I like about that, and what's cool about this is back then, so Rick and I used to teach the NASM CPT program as a 2-day format, the live workshop. And Rick, I believe you're still teaching that, right?
Yeah, we're doing a 1-day format, but yeah, we're doing that with NASM.
But so what we used, it was 1 day. I guess it was a 1-day format. You're right. And what we used to do, we used to teach that internally for the people at the health club, Town Sports International. I was in Washington sports clubs, and Rick was in New York sports clubs. From there, I went on to become, I was doing my master's degree through CUP, through the NASM program. And that's what I love about this, Rick. I mean, back then, you and I really were, we really enjoyed what we were learning from NASM. And now, so many years later, to actually have the opportunity to really still be involved and still have an influence is just, I think, just really cool. Just shows that you got to kind of keep your eye on the prize. But I went from being a trainer to being a director of education for a couple of years. I went to go work for another personal training certification organization where I helped create a lot of their education programs. And for the last about 7 years now, I've been a freelance consultant where I've been writing, I've been doing education programs. I teach the online CPT program for NASM, and then I do content development for NASM. I've been doing more and more writing blogs and helping out. I mean, that's what's a lot of fun with it, is being able to really take the information that I've learned and take the practical experience I've developed and really help a new generation of fitness professionals learn how to do the job.
Well, you've been doing that for sure, man. It's been good. I love coming across articles that either you write or sometimes this is what I like. I'll be somebody will reach out to me to be a subject matter expert quoted in an article, and I'll open it up and read it. And there you are in the same article with me, and that has happened multiple times.
Yeah, no, I love that too, man. That always brings a smile to my face when I find out that a reporter reached out to both of us, and little do they know. This is an important, I think, lesson, Rick, for people in the fitness industry. And on Thursday, I'm going to be on a call with SCW. And what's interesting is one of the people on the call with SCW is somebody I worked with more than 20 years ago. My first job in fitness was actually as a health club a membership salesperson. And that is that was not the right role for me. But Bill McBride and I were both sales guys at the same time with the same company. And now 23 years later, he's doing a thing. He went the operational route, and I went the education route. So the lesson to people is you never know when you'll work with somebody again. You don't want to burn bridges. As a friend of mine says, the fitness industry family tree is like a telephone pole. So you will, our paths keep crossing over the years. And you just got to keep that in mind, that it's a relatively small community, and you can either develop a really good name for yourself or you can go the opposite route. But it's just one of those things to think about in the long term.
Yeah, that is very true. And it's nice to see some of the work that you've done. I get the chance to listen to your voice on the podcast All About Fitness that you do, and you get to have some wonderful guests on there. And I was really, really jealous. And so then NASM let me start doing this with wonderful guests too. So now, now I get to follow in your footsteps on what you were doing. We're doing this as a webcast. And we're excited about the program, excited about having you on. And one of the things that we talked about recently is some of the new stuff that you've been working on. And I believe that you talked about like aging, which I start to feel is more and more appropriate for me. As honestly as I feel like in some ways I've been broken since I was in my early 20s, which is probably why I went deep into the corrective exercise route. But as I'm getting older and now inching up into my mid 40s, and some of those things have gone away, and I've gotten some new things, and I see that continually happening. But one of the interesting things is I've recently started doing some high intensity interval training. And some of the things that I thought was going to be really painful and really injurious to me based off of my previous experience just exercising actually don't bother me at all when I do high intensity stuff. And I know you've been looking into aging. You've been looking into high intensity interval training, metabolic conditioning. You have a chapter on metabolic conditioning in your Smart Workouts book. Talk to me a little bit more about kind of that path, like what sent you down that path, and then let's get into some of the science behind it and what it is that you see and some of the things that you're writing about.
I absolutely. Well, let me ask you this question first, Rick. And the problem with doing a podcast of my own is I can never turn off the interviewer. I can never take off the interviewer hat. But I'll use this to make a point. When you do the HIIT training, how long do you do the workout for? Like, how long is your HIIT workout?
The actual workout itself is not that long, maybe 30 minutes. We do a warm up, prep, we do a little cool down at the end. Generally go to a class, and those classes are 55 minutes, but maybe 30, maybe a few minutes, a little bit less, maybe sometimes a little bit more than 30 minutes.
Because the thing is, I think where HIIT gets misapplied, and for listeners or people tuning in, I also do a lot of education. I'm like the global, right now, I guess if you want to use a title, I'm the global master trainer for Stairmaster for both. I work with both Stairmaster and Nautilus as well. And Stairmaster everything we've done with Stairmaster has been centered around high intensity interval training. And when you look at the research on HIIT, it really has to do with intensity and not duration. So especially as we get older, you don't really need to do longer than a 15, 20-minute HIIT workout, because as long as you're doing the appropriate intensity on the intervals, that's all you really need. And there's a tremendous amount of research. One of the ones I like referring to is by Sean and colleagues. It came out in 2018. And what they did, Rick, is they had three groups. They had a treadmill group that ran 30 minutes 3 times a week on a treadmill. They had another treadmill group that did a 4-minute Tabata on the treadmill. Then they had a bodyweight group that did a 4-minute bodyweight circuit, 4-minute Tabata bodyweight circuit, and then they had the control group. It was a 16-week study, so it's a little bit longer normal study period than 8 or 12 weeks like they use. And for listeners, the study periods are usually 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 weeks to coincide with an academic semester. So there's a relatively short time sample for this. But over 16 weeks, what they found was the treadmill, the HIIT training on the treadmill got the best results. But the bodyweight interval training got the second best results, better results than the 30 minutes of continuous running on the treadmill. So it was really interesting, because what would you rather do, run 90 minutes a week on a treadmill or do 3 4-minute Tabatas? So you do it 12 minutes a week. And what they found, they measured weight loss, they measured aerobic capacity, and they found that it was the intensity of the training, not necessarily the duration, that had the outcome, that had the better outcomes. And when they look at that, they've actually started looking. And one thing to keep in mind is, before the 2000s, HIIT was used primarily only for high-level athletes, for collegiate and professional level athletes. So all the research up until the early 2000s was on athletes, high-performing athletes. It's been since the early to mid-2000s when they've been looking at HIIT for just the average population. And what they're finding is that it's great for people that are fighting chronic diseases. It's great for older adults. It's really very effective, again, being mindful of working on intensity and not volume. So meaning that one 4-minute Tabata or one 6-minute ladder workout is all somebody would really need to do in order to really get a good outcome of that.
I like that. when you were talking about the Tabata, that's kind of a key that starts to drive a lot of people, or it was one of the training styles that drove a lot of people towards the high intensity interval training. I think one of the reasons that it wasn't thought about as something to be applied is that there was an assumption, and in a rightful assumption, that there's not a correlation between anaerobic training and getting anaerobic effect. But we're starting to see that the lines are more blurred than that anaerobic training can indeed support aerobic capacity, but it doesn't actually work so well necessarily the other way around. What do you see on that?
No, you're absolutely right, and that's a great point, because that was one of the things that Izumi Tabata's research found, and they were working with speed skaters, and they're looking for a way to how could they support VO2 aerobic capacity training for speed skaters. And what they found was that the relatively short 20-second burst of really high intensity really helped improve aerobic capacity. And what they find is that one of the things it does is it produces the end. So you have free fatty acids and you have glycogen. And when you do anaerobic training, you produce the enzymes that break down glycogen more efficiently into ATP. Whereas if you're doing aerobic training, like you're working on free fatty acid oxidation, you don't necessarily produce the same enzymes. So that's one of the things that's one of the reasons why anaerobic high intensity training can actually boost aerobic capacity, is the muscles become much more efficient at producing energy and also clearing metabolic waste. And that, because that's the other thing, is that if you're running steady state at 70-75% max heart rate or max VO2, you're not going to accumulate a tremendous amount of metabolic byproduct of hydrogen ions or lactic acid, so the muscles don't become as efficient. Whereas if you're doing a really high intensity work interval, and people have to understand that recovery interval is critical. You need that recovery interval to kind of recycle the metabolic byproduct out and be able to go back right into the high intensity work interval again. So you're 100% right that the HIIT training can support aerobic capacity and aerobic endurance training, but it's not necessarily the opposite. The only thing that endurance steady state training will do is help with a little bit better recovery intervals on the HIIT. So that's one of the cool things. And what they're finding is that, like with clients, so where I apply this is at the end of a workout is doing only 4 to 6 minutes of, okay, here we're going to go. We're going to either do a Tabata or do a 5-minute cycle of 30 on, 30 off, where you go 30 seconds really hard and then 30 seconds of active recovery. And that way, what I like about that from a psychology standpoint is you can do 40, 45 minutes of corrective type exercise that really isn't that intense. But then if you do about 4 to 6 minutes of HIIT, of really intense training, the client feels like the clients want to feel like they had a hard workout, right? I mean, a lot of it is that psychology of a client comes to go, oh man, my trainer's really tough. But we know if they have the musculoskeletal issues, they really shouldn't be doing a lot of high volume, high intensity training. So being able to scale it and be able to do it in the right way really, helps us work with the client and give them 35, 40 minutes of that corrective that they need, but then also give them about that 5-10 minutes of just really hard, butt kicking, for lack of a better term, that the clients, their perception is what they want.
I love that. I've got a couple of things to speak to on this topic, and one is that I was doing a preparation for high intensity interval training presentation, and I was coming across this. It was a research study that was done in nursing homes. And what they did is they pulled several people out in the nursing homes and they gave them high intensity interval training exercises. Now, these are also populations who we look at in the past and we would go, why would you ever? Never would you ever.
Right.
And so what they found were some really incredible results. And unfortunately, I'm kind of digging through my notes as we're talking to get the study and the author. But what they found was a couple of things that they really exceeded the benefits that the other folks got where they were doing these kind of traditional aerobic style exercises. But it was the qualitative feedback that I thought was so incredibly interesting. And the qualitative feedback were that the people actually enjoyed the high intensity interval training more than the people who were getting on the treadmill or doing the aerobic style exercises. And listen, I know it's different strokes for different folks, but here you are having a sedentary population, people who may not have ever really done any type of exercise like this at all, and they're getting their butts kicked relative. Let's make sure we understand that, right? Like, so relative getting their butts handed to them, and they enjoyed it more. And that spoke volumes, because if anything speaks to me, it's getting people to like doing exercise. And if you can both like it and get more out of it, then that's a 1-2 punch.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, Rick, because what they found, there's also been studies that have looked at, that have asked people, do you like, how comfortable is it to do high intensity training or do HIIT style training? And there's been some research to suggest that people like that. It's like they would rather know they got to work really hard for 10 or 12 minutes than to work for an hour. So they'd rather get in, work hard, get it done with, and move on. But to really quick to follow up, what you asked me about aging. So right now I'm working on my second book that I'm calling Ageless Intensity. And that's where this is going, is a number of years ago, I realized, when I was working on a workshop for metabolic conditioning. And a lot of this high intensity interval training and high intensity metabolic conditioning, strength and power training, produces anaerobic hormones, or anabolic hormones, growth hormone, testosterone, and insulin growth factors. These are all the hormones that build muscle. And there's been some really cool studies of people in their 60s and 70s, and found out that not only does this type of exercise really improve their fitness level, but it can change their endocrine profile and actually elevate T levels and elevate GH levels as people get older. And so that's what my next book on is, really pouring through that research and saying, okay, if you're in your 40s like us, I'll be 48 this year, and you're in your 50s and you've been exercising for the last 30 years, you're not relegated to chair aerobics, because that's what we've been doing for the last 20 years, right? For older adults, okay, you're over 60, let's put you in this chair, let's give you some paper plates, let's give you a balloon, but think about it, the fitness, our modern era of the fitness industry started in the 70s. If you're 25 years old in 1975, now you're 70 years old. If you're 25 years old in 1975, when fitness really started booming, and you've been working out since 1975, they're going to have a much different ability to do a harder rate of work than a sedentary individual. And there's great research by Ball State University, again in 2018. A lot of cool stuff came out in 2018. Either that or I just haven't followed up with the stuff. But what Ball State did is Ball State went and they got a group of 70-year-olds that have been doing endurance activities their entire life. They got a group of 70-year-olds that have been working out their entire life, like casual recreationally exercise. Then they got a group of 70-year-olds that did nothing. That was a control group. And then they had a group of 20-somethings. And what they found are the two 70-year-old groups that have been exercising for 50 years had the same kind of muscle biopsies as people in their 20s, meaning that the same anaerobic enzymes, they had much better capillary density. So again, capillaries are where you get the tissue exchange and the oxygen. So literally what that research showed was that if you exercise regularly and you maintain consistency, you can literally freeze your muscle tissue in time. So if you start working out 25, 30 years old and you be consistent throughout the aging process, you are going to lose some muscle mass. That's going to happen naturally. We produce different hormones and different things happen in the body. But over the long course of time, you maintain your car. It's like buying a 1965 Mustang, and you have two options. You can throw that 65 Mustang in your backyard, and what's going to happen to it? It's going to fall apart, right? Or if you keep that 65 Mustang in a garage, you change the oil, you change the tire, you change the belt, you drive it regularly, that 65 Mustang could be good as new, 55 years later. And that's really what we're seeing with the human body is you got to stress the human body to some degree with high intensity training in order for the systems to operate at an optimal level. And that's really, and now that we're coming on to, people our generation, and that's the other thing, Rick, is we're Generation X, right? I still like going out on my mountain bike. I still like being active, I don't want to slow down. I got to be mindful of my favorite activities. But people I know guys who are over 50 years old, and they still ride half pipes. They're still popping 6-foot airs on half pipes. I don't know if you remember the name Matt Hoffman and Tony Hawk. Those guys are still, if you follow their Instagram feeds, Matt Hoffman's like 51, 52 years old, and he's still popping 10, 12-foot airs on a bike. Tony Hawk is still shredding the ramp. Dennis McCoy, these are all guys that were like the original X Games stars in the 90s, and they're now in their 50s and they're still riding hard. They're still doing their thing. So that's really what I wanted to do, is start understanding the science of how we can maintain our favorite activities. We can't do anything to stop the aging process. That we can't stop, right? But what we can do is use exercise and use it in the right way in order to kind of freeze how time affects our bodies, or try to allow us to maintain our fitness level throughout the aging process.
Yeah, I want to add to that story. We had a guy that used to be at the YMCA where my mom and dad were members of, and in Florence, Alabama, and his name was Mr. Pig, P-I-G-G. Did you ever meet Mr. Pig? He is 99 years old. And when they asked him, he started working out. My dad sent me an article in the paper about him, and I read about him. And he has been working out every day pretty much since his wife died, when they were in their 70s. And in the article, the journalist asked the question, "Do you think exercise is what has allowed you to live this long?" And he said, "I can't answer that. I don't know if it's allowed me to live this long, but it has allowed me to live this well." And that was a profound statement.
Well, and that's just it, right? Is exercise, what they're finding is, especially higher intensity exercise, it helps boost the hormones that build muscle, but it also elevates something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that's a protein that literally helps build new brain cells, in your brain. Obviously, it builds new cells in your brain. And that kind of dispels this idea of the dumb weightlifting jock, right? There's research to show that both strength training, anaerobic strength training, and aerobic steady state training both elevate levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, allowing people to stay cognitive, have better cognitive ability later on. And just this weekend, I was going through some literature, working on my book, and there's a high correlation between mobility, fitness level, and cognitive ability for people in their 70s. So the people who work out all the way through their 70s have performed much better on the cognitive tests than people who are sedentary. And so the message to trainers, I think, Rick, out there is that if you're a trainer in your 20s or the early 30s and you're working with clients in their 50s and 60s, the message isn't so much on weight loss and appearance. The message becomes, do you want the secret for slowing down the aging process? Do you want the secret for being able to maintain your youth? And that's what I've been doing with Nautilus and Stairmaster, is I've been writing our education programs around. Let's look at, yes, weight loss is important. Yes, we all want to look better. We know that. But really, strength training on Nautilus machines, high-intensity interval training on Stairmaster equipment, the evidence shows can really be the fountain of youth. We can't guarantee results, but we can say there's an overwhelming body of evidence to suggest that this type of training can really help you manage the aging process as you get older.
Here's another thing that we have some evidence for. I've got this article pulled up by Hyfing and Associates, and they're talking about high-intensity interval training and abdominal fat. And so what they did is they did a 4x4 minute work-to-rest interval, right? So you work hard anaerobically, 4-minute push, and then a 4-minute break. And that was repeated several times. And then they did it's a 12-week program, 4 days a week, 10-minute warm-up, 5-minute cool down. And what they did is they equated the aerobic exercise for oxygen expenditure. So basically, you're burning the same amount of calories, but what were the outcomes and the results? And here's what was pretty interesting. The intervention resulted in a similar reduction in body weight or body fat between the high intensity and the moderate intensity group. But there was a significant difference in abdominal fat reduction with the high intensity group. Pre and post test comparisons showed statistically significant decreases in subcutaneous fat by 19.5%. So that's pretty significant. But here's what's the other cool part. Its protocol was taken from coronary artery disease patients.
Yeah.
So again, with the kit and gloves, and we're so nervous about working with people. And I did find another research that did correlate a few more orthopedic risks with anaerobic kind of high intensity work versus aerobic, but it was hardly significant in its stats. So what you're looking at is that it's not that much more challenging orthopedically, and yet these results are seemingly incredible that these folks are getting. And again, we like to give pink dumbbells to people who are of a certain age, and we give them little bands, and we give them a chair to sit down in. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, Pete. I'm not saying that's wrong, because let's be honest, everything is individualized. But there is challenge that can be done, and when challenge and eustress is put on people, then we allow them to recover, and they get better and stronger from that.
I love the fact that you use the technical term for exercise, eustress, positive stress, because a lot of people overlook that, because really fundamentally that's what we do, right? Exercise is stress imposed upon the body. And you're right, and that's what for years, the approach has been towards older adults is, well, we want to take it relatively easy. But now that we're looking at people who are in their 60s and 70s who have been exercising for 10, 15, 20 years, you don't pull off the brakes. You don't pump the brakes. You be smart about it. Like the difference is, if you're in your 30s, I might say you can do HIIT maybe 2 or 3 days a week, as long as you're getting good sleep and nutrition to support it. By the time you get your 60s and 70s, I'd probably give you about 2 days a week with at least 2 full days in between. And keep in mind, it doesn't mean I throw you right in the deep end of the pool. If I were to use the Tabata interval, because I like doing this stuff, Rick, is you don't need to do the full 4-minute Tabata cycle, right? If I were working with Mr. Pig and Mr. Pig was in his 80s and we're just getting to know each other, I might finish the workout session. Okay, Mr. Pig, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to do a couple minutes of exercise, but I'm asking you to do two intervals of 20 seconds really hard. I might give them a 1 minute of a Tabata protocol, meaning 20 seconds really hard, 10 seconds of recovery, 20 seconds really hard, 10 seconds of recovery, and that's it. And build on that, because that's what the evidence is showing. And Martin Gabala, who I think spoke at the NASM conference a couple of years ago, Martin Gabala is a researcher out of McMaster University in Canada, and he wrote the book, The 1 Minute Workout. And I know that sounds like a cheesy late night infomercial thing to do, but Gabala's lab at McMaster has been studying HIIT for the sedentary population and has found that like a 3-minute warm up, 3 20-second intervals with like a 2-minute recovery after each one, and then a 2 3-minute cool down, that's 10 minutes, right? But if you do 3 20-second intervals, that 1 minute of high intensity is enough to start promoting health benefits and that's what they've looked at with coronary patients and with really older adults, is you start with that 1 minute. It doesn't mean I take Mr. Pig and say, all right, Mr. Pig, here we go. We're going a 40-minute Tabata class. We're going to do 6 sets of Tabata interval. Not at all. But what it does mean is we scale it back, and then we can do, like, one of my favorite things to start progression is like you do a 1 minute Tabata, 1 minute easy, 1 minute of Tabata, 1 minute easy, and you kind of stagger it like that. And then you do 2 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 1 minute, or then 2 minutes recover. Then you do 3 minutes, 1 minute recovery, and then you build up like that. So it doesn't mean you jump right into the deep end of the pool. It just means that over a period of maybe 4 to 8 weeks, you progressively start challenging the body. But even in people in their 70s and 80s, when they go through these type of protocols, have some pretty significant outcomes, and they respond to it. They have to have that mindset to know that this is going to be uncomfortable for 20 or 30 seconds, but the health benefits are pretty significant.
Yeah, I remember just getting started again into some of the high intensity stuff recently with the classes I was doing, and I went to see my business partner Aaron at an event that we were doing, and he was like, what's going on with you? And I was like, man, I feel like $100 right now. Like I feel like I found $100 on the floor. That's how my body feels. And it wasn't an easy class. Like, it was indeed challenging, but there are a couple things that we know. One is that there is a physiological effect that allows you to feel good, but we also know that when things are challenging and accomplished, there's an incredible sense of pride that goes along with it. So getting on a bike and maybe doing 60 minutes, it can be challenging, but the challenge is making yourself sit there and continue, versus something that is hard to do, hard to accomplish in the moment, and then you get it done. And the sense of pride that goes along with that is really huge. So you get this kind of euphoric effect of the exercise, but then you get this cognitive component to it that just makes you really proud about what you've done.
Well, here's one cool thing about the high intensity exercise. You're 100% right, and what you said right there, Rick, was absolutely correct. Is people that if you're working with an older population and you want to start introducing HIIT to them, don't use the treadmill, because there are some balance issues, and you have to speed up and slow down on the treadmill, and there might be some balance issues there. A rowing machine, one of the assault bikes where you use the legs and the arms, those would be much more just a stationary bike. Even a recumbent bike would be much more appropriate. So it doesn't mean I'm going to have somebody do treadmill, on a woodway curve and have them, do treadmill interval sprints on a woodway curve, because there are some issues. So we need to be mindful about it, like a rowing machine rowing machine is my favorite. The assault type bikes are one of my favorites, or even like with Mr. Pig in his 80s, I might have him do a recumbent bike, because that 20 seconds of really high intensity on the recumbent. But what you just said, though, is when you do this type of high intensity training, and when you give people a focus, saying, I want you to focus on 20 seconds at a time, you're giving them an external focus, and you're giving them a very finite goal, and that can help initiate the flow state. And the flow state is really that's where people get into what the athletes call the zone. And in exercise, we get dopamine, we get serotonin, and we also tap into our cannabinoid system in the body. Our body has its own internal cannabinoid system that helps reduce pain. So when people feel the runner's high, that's what's happening, is your body's releasing these neurotransmitters to kind of dull the pain sensation of the physical exertion. So literally, you can get people high at the gym. You can get your 70-year-old clients high at the gym by having them do little bits of interval training, because it's going to change their brain chemistry pretty significantly. I mean, this stuff is really, the more, and part of it is the more instrumentation that they get, and the better they can go, deeper they can go, the electron microscope analysis. They go, oh wow, we didn't realize this was happening too. Or for years, like research looked at one component, they go, oh well, we didn't realize that this was going on as well. So that's really where, kind of is being able to synthesize all that together and say, well, so what? How do we design the programs that really have an effect?
Nice. And I like that incremental build that you were talking about, where you've got somebody that maybe just doing a normal workout, whatever that means to you, but at the end of it, implementing just piecemeal at the end. At the end of our workout, we're going to do something really hard. Yeah. We're going to go really hard for a short period of time, and then it's over.
Exactly. That's what people, because if I tell you, Rick, if I say we're going to do this for 3 minutes, it's going to be really uncomfortable for 3 minutes, but it's only 3 minutes. Can you give me 3 minutes? And then people are like, okay, I can do that. And then they start feeling comfortable, because the whole idea of getting into the flow state is you want to kind of bend people but not break them. And that's really what, that's what the military special operations have studied the flow state pretty extensively. The athletes have studied it, business level executives. And it's that challenge. It's something called challenge skills, where if I challenge you to do more than you think you're capable of, you become focused on doing that. So if I say, Rick, I want you to do 4 sets of 30 kettlebell swings. Oh man, that's a lot. But after that first set where you knock out 30, is it going to be hard? Sure, but you knock out that one set, so your confidence builds to do the next 3 sets. Then you get through that workout, and you're like, wow, I did it. Yeah, it was hard, but I didn't break. And that's really, that's really where we can get into the psychology of what we're doing. And I actually just wrote a piece for NASM a couple months ago on how trainers can tap into the flow state with some of their clients. Use some of these flow triggers, as they're called, to really kind of make the training session more enjoyable.
Nice. I know this about study and in the workplace, that it takes about 20 minutes to get into a flow state when you're trying to sit down and write, when you're trying to read, when you're trying to do your job, usually where it's sitting down at the computer and working. What I'm trying to get my children to do, right? It's not just 20 minutes and you'll be in. And of course, if you tell him just 20 minutes, he keeps looking at the clock going, it's now only 15 minutes, right? So he's not ever getting into the flow state. He's trying to get out of this state of movement or focus. But what we know, at least in that world, is that if you can stay focused and involved for 20 minutes, just build into it to get yourself into the zone, then everything else starts to narrow and the line becomes pinpoint.
Well, isn't that that's one of the things, that's one of the biggest gifts that we can give our clients once we start working with them in person again, is with all this external stuff going on the outside, is that 1 hour that we spend with a client, or that 45 minutes that we spend teaching a class, we can let people forget all that other stuff so they can just focus on themselves for that time. They can challenge themselves to work hard. They can do something physically demanding. And real quick, to kind of come back to high intensity interval training, just to share with listeners. So starting in mid-March, they shut down all the parks and all the trails in San Diego and San Diego County, for the coronavirus thing. And so I couldn't go out on my mountain bike. So for 5 or 6 weeks, I was just doing body weight intervals in my apartment. It's not very big, and not much space, but I was doing like 4 minutes of Tabata, doing a couple different things at 4 to 6 minutes at a time, just once per workout. And they just opened up the trails last week, so I've been out on my mountain bike 3 times in the last week, and my VO2 feels just as good as it was before. There's always that one hill that's kind of like my test. How do I feel going up that hill? And usually I redline at about 170 beats a minute on my heart rate monitor. And after not being on my bike for 6 weeks, it was tough, but I still had that aerobic capacity to be able to do that hill. So that just, again, that's a test of one, and there's no controls, but it just, it was pretty, I was pretty surprised. I honestly was surprised that doing these body weight intervals in my apartment allowed me to maintain the aerobic capacity that I developed before the trails got shut down in mid-March.
Nice. I like that, man. And there's also something that's nice about being able to just get outside and go after that hill after being stuck for so long. So probably pretty amped to do that. Let me pop over to Greg just for a moment. And Greg, I'm going to ask you, do we have anybody that's in here that's popped into any questions about the high intensity interval training or working with an aging population and applying this kind of stuff, or anything else that might be being talked about in the chat?
Yeah, one question in regards to the best way to use body weight when it comes to HIIT and integrating that.
The interesting thing in Sean's research, what they did, and the spelling of that is SCHAUN. They used burpees. They used I think they did a man maker exercise. They did jumping jacks, and they might have done mountain climbers. Now, one thing I've noticed is that for people our age and older, Rick, that might have some back issues, might have some issues with their lumbo-pelvic hip complex, is burpees aren't always necessarily the best exercise. If you're 20-something, slam your face into the ground, go for it. So, but I would look at like jumping jacks, because everybody knows a jumping jack. Lateral skaters, where you lateral bounce side to side. Even running in place. I know that sounds a little silly, but I've done that in group fitness classes, and people get into it. Especially when you tell them to sprint and get their knees up. Running in place would do it. Mountain climbers, where your hands are on the floor and you're driving your knees up to the chest. So I'd look at those type of exercises as opposed to doing like burpees. And you'll appreciate this, Rick. One of my favorite ones I've been doing in my apartment. You remember those old we learned this from Juan Carlos Santana way back in the day. Remember those 2-arm rubber bands? Yeah, so I do a lot of like alternating rows with those 2-arm rubber bands, fast as possible. So it's a little bit different than a heavy rope, because my neighbors probably wouldn't like me too much if I'm slamming a heavy rope in my apartment. But doing those 2-arm rubber bands as fast as possible is one way to get the upper body involved.
Yeah, nice. I like doing speed squats.
Oh, yeah.
So how fast can I get my squats? And then certainly adding some jumps to it. So if you're capable of doing those jumps, landing with control, then talk about amping the heart rate up with some body weight. That's a serious event.
It is. No, speed squats are great. Yeah, no, thanks.
Yeah. Good question about the body weight exercises and being able to push yourself anaerobically. So anything else on that front, right?
Yeah, John wants to know, how long is a good time for a solid HIIT body weight workout, and how many days a week would you actually recommend doing it?
Well, but that's a great question for length, and that's where I come back to that research that showed that a 4-minute body weight, 1 4-minute Tabata is all that's necessary. If 1 4-minute Tabata produced, 3 times a week, produced better effects than 30 minutes of steady state training on a treadmill 3 times a week, that's where I would start. It's just 1 4-minute, body weight Tabata and build from there. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is we get in this mentality, especially here in the U.S. of more. We got to do more. We got to do more. But the research on HIIT is pretty equivocal that you don't need that. That if you start doing too much, you create something called the overtraining syndrome, where you actually overload your system. You actually, your body will produce more cortisol, and cortisol can turn protein, will convert amino acids into fuel. And that's one, and that, so this is where I point this out to people. And one thing I ask clients, and I point out to, if you ever smell your clothes after you work out and it smells like ammonia, that's a pretty good indicator that you've been metabolizing amino acids for energy. And we don't want, amino acids are only used for energy in extreme consequences, because nitrogen is a component of both amino acid and ammonia. So if your clothes smell like ammonia after you work out, it's a pretty good indicator that you're burning protein and amino acids and not carbohydrates and fat. So that's really what my advice would be, is start with 1 4-minute Tabata. Make it hard, though. I mean, it doesn't mean make it easy. It just means you have to be that last minute should really stink. I mean, that last minute should be really, really uncomfortable. But that's where you start. And just, if you want to add a second one, the only thing I would do is just maybe do 1 4-minute Tabata for lower body and 1 4-minute Tabata for upper body, which is kind of how I've structured it. I'll do the bands for 4 minutes, and I'll do lower body speed skaters and speed squats for 4 minutes, and call it at that. But yeah, it's not volume with HIIT training, it's intensity. So that's a great question. And 2, no more than 3 times a week, because it does take, think about it this way, with HIIT, you deplete glycogen levels in the muscle, and it takes 24 to 48 hours to replace the glycogen in the muscle cells. And if the muscle doesn't have glycogen available to it, the muscle cells don't have glycogen available, that's when amino acids can start being converted. It's called gluconeogenesis, when amino acids start being converted to fuel. And that's one of the things that cortisol will do in the body when people are in extreme stress state.
And I will point out also that I believe it's the ACSM has some recommendations on the anaerobic training, which suggests 75 minutes per week. Yeah. And there are also guidelines of an average of 150 minutes per week of aerobic cardio fitness, right? So you can deduct those 75 minutes from the 150. So don't think that the recommendation is 150 minutes of aerobic and then of anaerobic training an additional 75 minutes. That's not it.
Dude, and that
is also one of the things that concerning too, is that if you get people that are new to exercise, they think they have to do all 150 minutes. Even if you do the 75 minutes and now you still have another 75 minutes of exercise that you're supposed to do. We used to say this all the time, a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing. So don't feel like you have to commit to everything, because it puts people in an all or nothing mentality, which is, if I can't get 150 minutes, then I might as well do 0 minutes. And that's not true at all.
Well, and that's exactly why they've been studying HIIT for deconditioned populations, because people have this misperception is if I can't go to the gym for 30 or 40 minutes, I shouldn't go at all. When in reality, 8 to 12 minutes of, as you just said, of something is better than a whole lot of nothing. No, that's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this, man. Dude, thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else? Because we've pushed the limits on our 30 to 45-minute podcast as we're getting a little bit closer to an hour. Is there anything you want to add, including any ideas of when the release date for this book's going to be so we can buy it, and then also how people can find you and connect with you?
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, on Instagram, I'm Pete McCall _fitness. That's Pete McCall _fitness on Instagram. And what I've been doing is trying to throw up workout ideas while we've been all sheltering in place at home. And then the All About Fitness podcast, I just interviewed Marty Gabala again. I interviewed him a couple years ago, but I reached out to him at the start of all this to get his intake on bodyweight training, and he had some really good insights. So check out the All About Fitness podcast, and you can go back 2 or 3 episodes. And then, Rick, you'll appreciate this one. I interviewed Dorian Yates as well. Dorian is a 6-time Mr. Olympia, like how he's staying in shape now that he's almost 60 years old. So that's kind of like, it was kind of, that's the only interview. That's one of the only interviews I've been nervous for a long time, speaking with, because he was known as the Shadow. He didn't really do many public appearances. So I was really stoked to get that interview with Dorian and kind of ask him about how he's maintaining his fitness level now. So the All About Fitness podcast and on Instagram are probably the best ways to stay connected. And Ageless Intensity, we're looking at like a November release date. We want to try to get it out. I'm working with Human Kinetics on it, so we want to try to get it out before Christmas. And it really will be, it's going to be, I'm looking forward to it. I'm halfway through writing it right now, and I love digging into the research, and I love the opportunity to talk about it a little bit. So thank you.
Man, well, I wish you the best of luck on everything. And I know one thing about digging into the research, it can send you down a rabbit hole. So
yeah. Yeah, let's just say Amazon. I've been ordering. I have to keep ordering printer. I have to keep ordering print cartridges from Amazon because I'm printing so much stuff up. But yeah.
Oh, I bet, man. I bet. Well, congratulations on the opportunity for another one, and I'm looking forward to getting it. Thank you for being on, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you, Rick, and good seeing you, Greg. Man, I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome. It's good to have you, everybody. My name is Rick Richey. Thank you for being here. This is the NASM CPT podcast and our Facebook Live webcast.